Welcome to the Driven by Us podcast, driving change in STEM and media within automotive and motorsport. This season, we'll be speaking to key figures and inspiring role models within the industry.
Welcome to the Driven by Us podcast, driving change in STEM and media in the motorsport industry. And today I've got a very exciting guest, man of many talents, journalist, writer, broadcaster, presenter, the list goes on. And we had a little bit of a chat at the start. And I'd say racer, I'm going to put that in there. You say you're not that great, Lawrence, but I think you are. So it's the one and only Lawrence Barretto. Thank you so much for joining me. How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you very much for having me. I'm excited to have a chat. I love talking about racing. I love talking about Formula One.
Well, I want to really dive into sort of the person behind, what we see on the screen. So can we start, with your childhood? Can you describe how that was? Did you always have a love for racing and sport? What was that like?
I was super lucky that I just had a family who was passionate generally about sport. So we played a lot of sport together. We watched a lot of sport on the TV. We went to watch a lot of sport. And then for my dad and a lot of my uncles and my cousins, they loved Formula One. So we just ended up watching a lot of Formula One on the television. My first race I remember watching was the 94 Australian Grand Prix. Schumacher, Hill collided. And I was just fascinated by the politics of it all, the racing elements. I loved it. And I kind of got hooked on the sport from there on in and went to motorsport events, British touring car events, went to Formula One events in the UK at the British Grand Prix. And I kind of just got this buzz that I wanted to work in the sport. At that point, I wasn't sure exactly how. I knew it definitely wasn't driving, even though they said some very nice things at the start, but it definitely wasn't driving. And it was just at that point I knew I wanted to find a way to work in the sport.
So then talk about that transition. What was the first few steps that you made then coming into the industry?
I think because I was lucky enough that I knew what I sort of wanted to do, that made trying to find a pathway a little bit clearer. So even from as early as like year 9, year 10 at school, I was going to careers fairs and specifically talking to universities about, what's the pathway into Formula One and that kind of thing. And I was good at writing, essay writing, that kind of thing. And that was my strength at school. So it kind of made sense for me to become a writer, really. So I kind of focused on trying to become an F1 reporter. I used to listen to BBC 5 Live a lot for their commentary. And so you had David Croft and Holly Samos on there. And I wanted to be like a pit lane reporter. So I kind of try to work out a plan of how best to do that. I went to Bournemouth Uni. They did a multimedia journalism degree, which was awesome. Their media school was great. And I learned a lot there about practical journalism. So that's, getting a camera and going and filming, sitting in a radio studio, making a news bulletin, writing features, going out and interviewing people, taking a step out of your comfort zone, really. And it was that experience that kind of at least reminded me or helped me understand that I could do it. And then it was a case of trying to find a way into Formula One.
Do you think it's crucial that you should go to university to get this type of experience? Because, some people don't pick that route. They might do, apprenticeships or just first hands-on experience, small journalism courses. I loved my time at university. So for me, I'm like, I don't think it's 100% crucial, but it gave me an amazing platform because I don't know if it's the same for you, but I had a show reel at the end of it. I could apply for jobs while studying at the same time. You got access to cameras and equipment. So is that the same experience for you?
Yeah, I think
beneficial?
So. Yeah, I think it was hugely beneficial. I think that I learned all about the different types of journalism then, so it would help me kind of focus what route I wanted to take. I think you're with contemporaries who want to get into journalism, so you bounce ideas of people, you see their different styles. So I think you learn a lot about yourself and about other people there. I think you learn a lot about yourself as a person actually going to uni, how to grow up essentially, and that's probably one of the biggest things I got out of university. Do I think that it's necessary though to make it into our industry now, in the world that we live in now? Not necessarily. I think there are huge benefits of going to university because of the doors that it could potentially open. It might help you get work experience. You'll get hands-on experience, in radio studios, in a TV studio. But I think now with social media, with ways you can set up your own blog, have your own YouTube channel, I think there is ways of creating content or showing that you can make content and that you've got a talent without necessarily going to university. All that means is it's an even more competitive marketplace than it was back before, social media and more of the digital media that we're working at the minute.
Yeah, which I will get to that as well because I really want to pick your brain on that. But have you always been quite a confident person? Because I find that, the longer that you're in the industry and you change as a person, were you more confident at the start? Are you more confident now? Like, has that fluctuated? Or have you always sort of been super confident?
Oh, I've never been super confident. I'm not even confident now,
You're
to be honest.
joking.
No,
You
I was.
come across so confident, honestly.
That's very kind. I was super shy. Talk to my close friends now and my family, and they'll tell you that I was super shy when I was younger. I actually use journalism, and I still do my job now to kind of get out of my comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that when I'm working, I just see it slightly differently, and I push myself to just try and be a bit better, a bit more open, a bit more extroverted. So I think that's why I really wanted to pursue this career, and why I moved from writing into presenting and broadcasting, because I think it's another level there really to just improve my confidence. So I still don't think I'm super confident. It's really nice of you to say, and I guess I try to be confident when I talk about things, that when you're at races and trying to give analysis, I try to be confident. I try to be confident in interviews, because I think that you get better content out of it. But it's a constant journey. Like, you're working on it all the time, and there's that striving for perfection, and I'm nowhere near that yet. But I'm enjoying trying to find it.
Yeah. Which I don't think you should, really, because when you strive for that, then you actually start to make mistakes, because you're like, oh, I need to be amazing. I can't, slip up. I can't get any information incorrect. And you put so much pressure on yourself. Then you're like, oh, I'm not perfect. Am I good at my job? And it becomes this whole frenzy, speaking from experience. So, do you ever feel that pressure working with amazing brands like BBC and Formula One and Channel 4? Is there ever a pressure that gets to you at times? Any obstacles that you faced in this career?
I think there is a pressure, because when you work for the likes of the BBC and, like you said, Formula One and Channel 4 and very, very big brands. I worked for Autosport as well, which is obviously the pinnacle of motorsport press. I think there is a pressure because you've got to deliver. Like, you've always got to be right. You've got to be accurate. You've got to be quick in certain circumstances. You've got to deliver respectable journalism. So I think there is that pressure, but I think that's a really good pressure to have, because I think it pushes you to another level. It makes you work harder. It makes you double check things. It makes you research harder.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I was actually weirdly always searching for that pressure, searching for that way of pushing myself to the limit and seeing what I could achieve. So I've had a great time and been very fortunate to work with some great brands. But I love it. I wouldn't have it any other way.
Mm-hmm. And have there been any barriers that you face, regarding ethnicity and background and gender, like when you first came into your career, or even now? Are you noticing any barriers at the minute?
I think when I was growing up, my parents always kind of said to me that you just need to not think about any of that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you just need to just crack on. Like, you're just a normal person. Like, even though I went to school and I was one of the few non-white kids in the school, I think the fact that they instilled in me that you're not different kind of meant that I didn't really honestly think about it at school, and maybe I just had good classmates, maybe I just had a great school. I don't know the ins and outs of it, but I had a really good experience there. It was only maybe when I was growing up and you maybe go outside of that comfort zone and you just go out into towns, you explore different parts of the country, and I think you do have some experiences where you are made aware that you are different, and I think it's just about how you are able to cope with that. And I think because I had a strong network of family and friends who have always been super supportive, I think that's really helped me kind of ignore those barriers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when I've gone through my career and I've tried to go for opportunities, I've tried to get jobs, tried to get roles, tried to create roles, I've never considered that there is a barrier there, even if there is one, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I've tried to ignore that barrier and then just try to do the best job that I can.
Mm-hmm.
And then if I lose out and I don't get that job, or I miss out on an opportunity, I just train myself to try and accept that it's not, the only reason is because of experience, or because there was a better qualified person, or that better person better suited it. So I've tried to be, I guess, naive in a way, just to try and protect myself from that. But what I would say generally throughout my career, there are people that I met through university who work in Formula One, who still work in Formula One now, who have been super supportive. And I've always found Formula One a super supportive environment. People use the word family and they kind of throw it around a little bit, but it is genuinely true, at least in my case. And so when I'm in the paddock, I don't really feel any problems, and I haven't really felt any problems. There are, when you go to certain countries, there have been certain issues, but I think it's just trying to find a way to to get on top of that and to have the support of the people around you.
Yeah, so you'd say like the advice really is just not to think about it. I think that's quite beautiful though, to sort of be naive to it, unless obviously it comes your way and there's some sort of confrontation there. Because even with myself, I saw a lot of positive impact growing up, and I know we're from different generations, so mainly like I think now potentially it's getting slightly better, and you know, companies like Formula One or different companies in the motorsport industry are getting a little bit more inclusive and bringing that equality into it. But I remember when I applied for university, someone sort of said to me, you probably have a better chance getting in because, you know, you have a different ethnicity. And I was like, is that a good thing or a bad thing? And it can really be quite confusing. But I think if there are more opportunities anyway, it all just becomes second nature. Then, like you say, I'm not thinking, oh, is this because of my background, my gender, you know, my colour, whatever it is. It's just like you say, I got this job or I didn't get this job. I got into this university or I didn't get into this university. So do you think you're seeing, you know, more diversity now in the motorsport industry?
Oh, 100%. I'm seeing more diversity. And I think that's great. I think it's great that you're seeing more women working in Formula One, that you're seeing more non-white people working in Formula One, and actually different ages as well. So I think maybe if you were to look at the press room, the written journalists, say, who were covering the sport, say, I don't know, 30 years ago, they were predominantly probably white males of a slightly older generation. If you go in there now, honestly, it's completely different. And I think that's great, because it does mean that when people, say, read articles or they watch the TV coverage, they can see that it's changing, and that there is an opportunity. I think if they want to pursue that pathway, that actually there is a real chance.
Yeah.
When I came into Formula One, it was just before Lewis was coming in. So he was coming through GP2, which is now F2. And so he was really having a tough time of like being the one who was different coming through. And I think so I've really seen firsthand like how that has evolved over time. And he's done a really good job, I think, of like, as he's become stronger and more successful and had a stronger voice, really kind of fighting.
Yeah.
And I think that's great. And I think that has encouraged not just people to want to be racing drivers, it's encouraged people to want to be engineers or, you know, work in marketing or comms or hospitality or journalism. Like, I think it really has made an impact. And I think it's had a positive impact from the point of who I've talked to when I talk to kids who go to, you know, primary school, secondary school, who want to work in media. They kind of talk about physically seeing people and that making a difference.
Yeah, because I think you need that inspiration, don't you? Like when I was younger as well, I didn't really have many girls to go karting with, and now there's so many girls. So it is all about breaking those barriers. Once you see more people that look like you, gender, colour, whatever it is, it does really give you that fight to think, I can do that. I can have that job. But how's your time been in Formula One? You know, I'm sure there's highs, there's lows. How's it been? How have you found it?
I've loved it. I think I had a really good build up, like a glide path into it. So my first couple of jobs was maybe I did a race or two a year. I kind of started to get to know people. People then start to remember you, you know, drivers get to know you, and you start to build these relationships. And I think as you build those relationships, things in some ways get easier, because you have the confidence to go in and ask for interviews, to ask slightly tougher questions, to go for some bolder content ideas. And therefore you get way more job satisfaction. But then they get harder because your bar goes higher. So what you want to achieve is higher. And I think you're only as good, in my view, as your last piece of content. And so therefore, as much as you might want to be really happy with the great like feature that I've just done, or the great live show that's just happened, you're like, but I need to do it better the next time around. So I think what I've really loved about my time in Formula One is the evolution. And I started working for Autosport kind of primarily then when I was doing full-time racing, full-time covering Formula One. And that was a real good way of getting to know the written media and kind of getting to know the people within Formula One in the teams on one level. And then I've moved into broadcast, and you kind of get to learn to get to know them in a different way. And so I think from that perspective, I'm always learning, and that's what I love about my job at the minute.
What's like the main thing that you've learned about yourself in this job? And that can be like personal, that can be like professional element. What have you learned?
I've learned that I've got way more confidence inside of me if I unlock it in the correct way. And I think that I'm generally a person who puts a lot of pressure on myself. I get stressed quite easily internally. And I think I've learned ways of controlling that so that I can actually harness it into a real positive factor, and that can have a positive impact on the content that I made. But I've also learned that I love traveling the world. I've learned that I love meeting new people, that I love to generally talk to people. I love like interactions, engaging. I think that's what I get joy out of life, I think. And so I think the quirky job that I have in the minute, which is, fortunately traveling the world, not 9 to 5, is exactly the right thing for me. Because on those days when you are exhausted because you've worked long hours, you've done 14 days on the road or whatever, and you're tired and you're like, why am I doing this? And then you just look back and think, well, look at all of the great things that I've managed to do, achieve, the great people that I've met, the great interviews that I've done. So I think that I'm very fortunate to be able to have that way of kind of boxing things in the right way and kind of having the right recollections.
Did young Lawrence ever think this is where he was going to be?
I think Lawrence hoped that that's where I could get to. But I think I'd be lying if I said that I thought I could get to where I've got to now. Because I think at the time, like I remember I talked to a career advisor and I told them I wanted to work in Formula One. And she was like, yeah, but why didn't you just go for something a bit more like practical and sensible and realistic? Why don't you get a job with like the Yellow Buses company, which was in Bournemouth at the time, work in marketing and comms. And I was like, no, thanks. Like, that's just not
what
for
I
me.
want to do. Yeah.
And I think it was around that time that I realised that I think I was okay with failure. Like, I think I was okay with pushing and pushing and pushing.
Mm-hmm.
And then if it didn't happen, then that was okay because at least I tried. But it took me a bit of time to kind of come to terms with that. And I think once you free yourself from that, then you can push and then you won't have any regrets at the end of it. And I think I've been really fortunate that I've met great people who have helped me and supported me and given me opportunities. But I've worked as hard as I can to get to where I've got to. I do love it. I'm super passionate about it. And I'm very lucky that I've got a very supportive family and friends who they're like my biggest cheerleaders. So I think when things go well or I want to do something well, I do it because I want them to be happy as well.
Yeah.
So, and they've got like to where I've got to now, they get great experiences out of it. So I think it's like a massive win, really, when you work for it. But you just never knew. I never knew it was going to be this good. I really didn't.
I think that's the thing in this industry. You can have an idea of, where you want to be, but you never know what's going to happen because, you do one job and then someone sees you and says, oh, I'd love you for this job. And then you do that, which you didn't expect you were going to do. And then you really love this new industry. And then you go, oh, I'll do this. And then I'll do this type of racing. And it just sort of bounces everywhere. So what tips would you give to someone that wants to enter the industry now?
Well, I think it's kind of what you were just saying there. I think have a rough idea of what you want your end goal to be. So have quite a big scope of what that is. And don't be afraid to divert at any point on the path there. That doesn't mean that you're giving up on that opportunity. It just means that you're taking your opportunities and then you've always still got the same end goal. And it doesn't matter what kind of path you have to take to get there. So long as you get there and you have fun, importantly, along the way, and you do some really cool things along the way. So I think my advice would be that have options. Like, obviously, I wanted to work in Formula One, but when I worked at the BBC, I worked on the Olympics, I worked in tennis, I worked in other sports. I thought about, maybe going more specifically into radio and working on news bulletins. I thought about other things as sort of like a backup and
just kind of open, basically.
I think so, and just have a real kind of open idea of what you want to do, but also just don't give up and don't be afraid if 100 people in a row say no, don't be afraid to get down, because you will get down about that, because it is hard and it's annoying and people don't reply. Of course it's annoying. And don't be angry at yourself that you're getting down is what I would say. But you only need one of those people to say yes.
Yeah.
So eventually, if you keep trying, something will happen, even if it isn't. I know not everyone will be as lucky to get their final job, but I still think if you keep pushing, and we were talking just before about some of the wonderful guests you're going to have on this series, all of them will tell you that they've had to fight to get to where they've got to, and they are now having a great time and it's worth it. So keep doing it, but it probably wasn't exactly what they thought it was going to be at the start, just like me.
Would you suggest that you should do, say if it's motorsport that you really want to get into and Formula One is your goal, would you suggest that you should do, different series in the motorsport world to get all that experience, even if it's media, engineering, whatever it is, and then, go towards Formula One?
I think you've got actually here a load of options. I think you can go down that path of working in lots of different motorsports, and that doesn't just mean work up the single-seater ladder and so learn it that way. You could go work in sports cars, you could go work in MotoGP, in IndyCar, in NASCAR, because I think my experience of motorsport is there are general themes that link all of the championships together, even if they are all slightly different.
Yeah.
And I think people who work in motorsport love it so much that everyone moves around. So you'll probably end up meeting people in one motorsport that you'll end up working with in another.
Yeah.
So I think that is one path. But my path, I think, was because I loved sport generally. I went for just go for everything I loved because I was passionate about it. Like I covered rowing at the Olympics. And I was lucky because I just loved rowing. I had a real interest in it. I watched the university boat race.
Yeah.
And so I knew we would be good at the Olympics. I knew Great Britain were going to be good at it in 2012. So that's what I kind of really focused. I learned about the sport. I met all the people involved, but I had no real experience in it. And that kind of then got me to the Olympics. It then got me into the athletics the week after, and I was covering Usain Bolt, winning those gold medals. And I think it was just trying to take the opportunities where they came. I didn't know for sure that was actually going to help me, and I couldn't scientifically prove that has helped me get to where I've got to now. Yeah. But I think I learned a load of skills
there. Good experience, I would say, though.
For sure, and confidence. It was great for confidence in interviewing, because I think whoever you interview, it doesn't matter if you're interviewing someone down your local council or a Formula One racing driver. Yeah. You need the same skill set. So I think from that perspective, that's why I say doesn't have to specifically be motorsport. Yeah. You will obviously have to cross over at some point, and that will be tricky. But I think you should try and keep options open. Or the other thing is, if you want to go into broadcasting, just go and excel in broadcasting in a different arena. Whether that is finance for the Daily Mail. It could be anything, but just go and make good content. And then if you make good content, then I think if you have the passion for motorsport, I think ultimately people will want that experience, and then if you can research and talk about it passionately and knowledgeably, I think you can move across as well. So I think there are lots of paths.
Well, I think now there's an amazing opportunity with TikTok, and Netflix Drive to Survive brought so many young fans in. There's so many young girls and boys on TikTok, doing an analysis of the race, or you're talking about the tech of the car. So that's a really great entry point. But what's your opinion of this sort of changing world of the media in Formula One? Because it's so different now. You have influencers come into races, and people have different opinions on that. Some people are, why are they there? Some people are like, this is so great, we're getting so much traction for the sport. So what's your opinion of sort of everything changing right now?
I mean, my general opinion is all content is good content, because I think it will all appeal to different demographics. I think I've learned, obviously, when I first started, and this shows how old I am, when I was at university, we didn't have an online module. It was print, so we were focused on writing for newspapers, right? If you then look at the way that the media landscape has changed since then, it is dramatic. And I think that there will be people out there who will have skill sets to excel in those different ones. So someone who's great at TikTok might not necessarily be great at long form documentaries. They might not necessarily be great at writing a long form feature. So I actually think that having all of those different types of content is great. Because I think, say, my little cousins will only ever follow Formula One through YouTube and TikTok and social media, whereas my dad will watch the races and read stuff online. So I think it's important that we actually have more kind of different types of content gatherers, because I think then we can appeal to a greater market and get Formula One and motorsport in general to a greater market. It does make it trickier for someone who works in the industry, because I think when I came in, my skill set was writing. So I've had to add other skills to it, which is trying to understand social media.
Yes, which is a whirlwind, really.
Exactly. I mean, we've got tons of specialists at Formula One who work on social media solely. And so for you to have that means it's obviously a skill, right, to get the very best out of it. So I think the challenge these days is just to try and mold yourself into someone who is adaptable. Yeah. And when you're thinking about, say, an interview idea with a driver, for example, aside from the sit-down interview you're going to do, what can you do that will work on social in addition? What can you do that maybe can be a clip for a documentary that's getting making? What could you do for a feature you're going to write further down the line? So I think being adaptable and having a wide skill set range is definitely a bigger or greater importance these days.
Because there is this crossover now, really, I think, with presenters and content creators. As presenters, more traditional ones, probably like yourself, is do I have to cross over into the world of content creation? Do I need to be dancing on TikTok and doing all these different types of trends, or can I stay in my lane? And then content creators obviously do all these extravagant things on the camera and their phones, but then they're now branching out into presenting roles. So I think there's this massive crossover, which is great, but also competitive. Like you said at the start, now it's so competitive because everyone's sort of doing everything. But I really love that, because I do think you should have some transferable skills. You know, what is your niche? That's one thing I always say to people is pick what you like to do, because like you said yourself, you know, if you're good at documentaries doesn't mean you're going to be great on TikTok, vice versa. So pick the things that really work for you. But let's chat about the Formula One 2024 season.
Okay.
How have you found it? You know, there's sort of mixed opinions at the start. We thought it was going to be a Max Verstappen domination, and now we're not really seeing that. So how have you found it?
So, yeah, I agree. I think after those first 2 or 3 races, I felt like, and a lot of the press corps felt like, we were in for another season like last year, you know, where Red Bull won 14 or 15 races before Carlos won in Singapore. And I think there was a bit of wariness about what to expect. And then you had Carlos winning in Australia, you had Lando winning in Miami, you had George winning, Lewis winning, and suddenly you had 7 different winners in 14 races. So this is an incredible time for Formula One. It's an incredible time for someone working in the media like myself, because you don't know what's going to happen when you go to a race weekend. And we've talked a little bit about pressure on this podcast, and the pressure ups then, because you can't comfortably go into a week and go, well, we know Max as a baseline is going to win, so what else are we going to do?
Yeah.
This time, you just need to be able to react to whatever happens. And we've had great moments this year, like Lando and Max colliding in Austria, and I'm not saying it was great that they collided, but I think it was great that we saw that rivalry come to life. We got to see, you know, what Lando's got, how far Max will push the limit. And I think from that perspective, then when you interview them afterwards, there's just a bit more spice, there's a bit more excitement.
Drama that you can obviously then feed off, and it's going to be great for the broadcast.
It's great for the broadcast, but I think it's actually fundamentally great for the drivers, because you see more of who they really are. You get to see the realness, the real passion, the real desire to win at all costs, essentially. And that's what you need if you're going to be successful in Formula One. And I think for a long time now, because Max has been so dominant, even though we've had great racing for second and third and great results further down the grid, you don't actually see that final bit of passion that you want or need when you're fighting for a Grand Prix win. And I think we've been really lucky this year to say that we've had that. And I can't see why we won't have that for the last 10 remaining races of the season.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really exciting, but there's been so much drama this season. What were your opinions with the Hamilton to Ferrari move? Are you supporting that, or?
I mean, I think that there have been so many false starts over the years and rumours that, you know, Lewis is going to Ferrari, and he'd obviously had very informal talks with Ferrari, but nothing had really come to fruition. So I think that when that story broke in February, actually only a few weeks after Günther Stein obviously left Haas, I think it really set the tone for this year. It set the tone for a real change in the sport. No one was really genuinely expecting him to leave Mercedes a year early. People weren't sure if he was really finally ever going to take the plunge and race in red. I think it's a great story for Formula One. I think it's a pretty cool thing for Lewis, because I think for his legacy, it will give him an opportunity to see if he can win at Ferrari in a way that a number of drivers haven't been able to do. Some very talented drivers haven't been able to do. And I think also it shows the longevity of him, because he's heading into his 40s. He's going to be racing into his 40s, and he's taken on a new challenge. And I think that's a great story. I'm excited to report on it going forward. I'm excited to see what he can do alongside Charles Leclerc. I thought it's a great story. And then you also get the new dynamic of what do Mercedes do? You know, it's a new era there now. It's a lot of change. So it had a real impact on the driver market, kind of blew it wide open. Tough for Carlos Sainz, of course. And so there's been some really interesting stories that have come out of it.
Safe to say it's not been stale this season. I think we were all anticipating that at the start, thinking, oh gosh, you know, it's just going to stay like this. And it hasn't at all. However, I am actually quite terrified for that move to Ferrari, because who becomes the number one driver? Who is going to be favoured more? Is it going to be Charles? Is it going to be Hamilton? You would think it's going to be Hamilton, but then Charles has been there for a number of years now, so they're not just going to sort of say, oh no, we're going to favour Hamilton and Charles will just take a back step. What are you expecting is going to happen there?
I think it's going to be a fascinating dynamic. I think we're going to get to see what Charles Leclerc's really got. I think that Ferrari have rated him highly for a long time. They've obviously brought him through into Formula One. He is a high quality driver, maybe one of the greatest qualifiers ever. So I think that Lewis coming on board might be his opportunity to be pushed up to the next level.
Right.
And we will get to see whether or not he can do that.
Yeah.
I think Lewis will go in there, and I think he'll be under pressure because of his experience and his success so far. He won't have the environment that Charles has, which is he'll know everyone. He'll have to go learn the names of people, for example.
Practice
and that will
the Italian as well.
Exactly. And that's all going to take time, right?
Yeah.
And you can be the most talented driver in the world, but you can't flick any of those switches very quickly.
Yeah.
But I think that we've seen at times this year, again, for the first time in a long time, really, that the real Lewis, the great Lewis, the one that marks him out as the greatest of all time, still exists. And I think that if Ferrari get that Lewis, if they can kind of get the most out of him, then I think he's going to be a very formidable opponent. I don't know what the answer is in terms of like who they're going to favour. They'll favour the fastest driver ultimately, but I don't know which one that's going to be. And I think it will be a fascinating dynamic to watch how Fred Vasseur is going to manage that.
Yeah, I'm terrified, honestly. So I don't know how you're going to feel when you're reporting on this. But do you have any unpopular Formula One opinions? I've got one to kick it off.
Okay.
I think Romain Grosjean is the best driver ever. That is my unpopular opinion.
When you say best driver ever, as in the greatest of all time?
So I know that he's not, and I really want to believe that he is. I don't know what it is. I love Romain Grosjean when he was in Formula One, and I know he's chaotic and messy and similar to Kevin Magnussen, brings the drama. But that is my unpopular opinion. No one else will ever agree with me. Do you have any unpopular opinions?
I don't think I have any opinions,
not as rogue
unpopular
as mine.
opinions that can begin to rival that. I think that I'm generally pretty glass half full when you look at racing drivers. So I think, Kevin Magnussen, for example, has had a really tough time of it from a public perception perspective this year because, he's racked up all those penalty points. He's had a lot of collisions. And I think a lot of people are just saying, look, Kevin, you've had your time. You need to go. But I think that's disrespectful on a number of levels because I think that he has done a great job to survive in Formula One for this long, to come back and do the job that he's done for Haas has been impressive. Yeah, he's been outperformed by Nico Hülkenberg. But I think there are a number of drivers like Kevin that I think sometimes get a bit of a bad rap.
Yeah.
And I think that he is one driver who's always impressed me. I think he always had raw talent, still has got raw talent. He just hasn't been able to maybe get the final bit out of it. So
I think he's a great teammate. That's sort of my opinion, because he will help Nico. Where they've been like, go get those penalties, cause the drama, you will get a penalty. But actually, it's helped out Hülkenberg. So that's my opinion of Kevin Magnussen, I would say.
Yeah, and I think that's a really fair opinion to have because I think, and also what makes him such a potent driver to have because it's all well and good having the fastest driver.
Yeah.
But if you don't have a driver that is a team player and who is quick, then I think it becomes difficult. So that's probably the closest that we're going to get from me for
this unpopular Formula One opinion. Okay, so we're going to end off this podcast with, we are going to ask other people questions. So our next guest is going to come in. You don't know who the next guest is.
Okay.
So you need to ask them any question that you would like. It can be Formula One related. It can be about personal, professional life, whatever. So when they come in, I will ask them the question at the end of the podcast.
Okay. I think what I would really love to know is, what is the most random thing that has happened to them while they were on a race weekend working? So there must have been something over the course of a race weekend where you're going about your normal tasks, so you know what your structure and your schedule is, and then something completely out of the blue has happened. I want to know what that was and how they dealt with it.
That's a great question. I love that. Thank you so much for chatting with me, Lawrence. Honestly, it's been amazing. I wish I could chat to you for so much longer, but you're a very busy man. I know you've got lots to do before the second half of the season. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me. The time has flown by, so I've really enjoyed it. So yeah, thanks very much for the chat. Appreciate it.
Thank you.